Hey, my name is Linzi, and welcome to episode 1 of Zeepkist Map Reviews, a new series where you submit your maps for review and we'll provide you with our honest feedback and criticism, as well as get into the finer details on what works and what to avoid when building your new Zeepkist maps. For this first episode, we're reviewing maps from each of our team members, plus a bonus review from a member of the community, so you know who's working behind the scenes and what to expect when you submit a map for yourself. But I'll go over that at the end of the episode. I've done enough rambling, let's move on to where it actually starts. Emerald Skies 2 by justMaki. This track is just beautiful. Every unique detail is a wonder to see in photo mode, and the color palette just makes everything pop that much more. It's funny really, the environment is so playful and bright, and yet this track is insanely challenging for the average racer, requiring lots of fine adjustments in your movements. But beyond the difficulty is some extremely fun and unique gameplay, using the track pieces you're so accustomed to and just mashing them together to create this masterpiece. My first impressions? I love it. Now let's get to specifics. What do I like about this map? The track piece colorization. The decision to use a large variety of greens and combine them with the patchwork design of the layout is just genius, and really helps to accentuate all the transitions from one road piece to another. I also really enjoy the line this level forces you to take. It's tough, but when you get it right, it feels so right. This is a great example of when a mapper doesn't want you to deviate from the initial line too much or even at all. And depending on the intent, that can be good or bad, but in this case, it's good. It doesn't make the player do anything innately unintuitive, but it may throw you a sharp turn every so often, so look out. And what do I dislike? Some of the landings and transitions can unity bounce you, which is unfortunate, although it isn't entirely the mapper's fault. But with the nature of this level, going from track piece to track piece, it seems to incur those bounces more than the average track would. It won't be a problem for everyone, but it did get frustrating over time as I was playing. I'd say this only just barely matters though, and there is no real fix for a map like this. Now, a few times on this track I had to ask myself, what did I just die on? And lo and behold, there are a few road edges that protrude into your path unexpectedly. This can be hard to fix in post, but can be mostly avoided if you're aware enough before decorating. Just always make sure that if there is an obstacle in the player's path, it is more than visible to them, and they should be able to react accordingly. Here's a few examples of what I mean, the worst of which being this one near the start of the level. It's in poor lighting and can still be hard to see even when in photo mode. This next one is defined by its shadow, but it took me a few tries to realize it was even a gap. To me, it just looked like another shade of green that a road piece would use if it was there instead. And the last one is this jumble of pieces seen through the checkpoint. There is a white line to help guide you through the section, but it's only really a band-aid solution. Keep in mind that for all of these, you are whizzing past them at high speeds, and the reaction time to properly evaluate them just isn't there. I would say these points matter somewhat, as the problems disappear as soon as you're aware of them, but it should be kept in mind for the future. An extra note I wanted to make is about this arrow. It just bugs me that it's pointing left instead of right. It really isn't a big deal, as the whole map requires some level of learning, but I can definitely see this confusing a few players. But overall, I think this is a really well-made map, with only a few things I would change if I were to make it myself. The decoration is astounding and it's an enjoyable challenge. The pros heavily outweigh the cons for me. Anyways, let's see what the next map has for us. Took a break to collect pets by Kernkob. With the legacy Kernkob holds, you might think this is another challenge map. But no, actually, this is quite the normal, flowy, and enjoyable level we all know they're capable of making. But let's not linger any longer. What's the good with this level? The simple color palette and skybox gives some great nostalgic feelings, only barely staying away from being entirely unpainted. Normally, unpainted maps can be a sign of low effort or carelessness, but this specific style is definitely choice and plays off well. The simple tree and rock combination adding greatly to this. Creators can often completely overdo it with trees and rocks, but this map uses only the bare minimum to keep optimization super high. You don't need to go all out when decorating to make an enjoyable map, and this is a great example. Additionally, the smooth banked landings and wall rides make this map flow extremely nicely, as long as you can manage to set up properly beforehand, which adds a nice bit of challenge and optimization to an otherwise simple track. And finally, finding the hidden pets strewn about was pretty enjoyable. I always love seeing hidden Easter eggs in maps, those little touches from the creator that show you they care. Now, what could be improved? Likely the most obvious one, the gap into the final turn is entirely blind faith. There is nothing at all telling you where you need to set up, and you will only know after either missing the landing completely or getting a lucky guess. Obviously, this should have something guiding you, a line or a dot on the edge of the takeoff, a hanging sign overhead the landing. Either of these I think would make a great fix that still fits within the theming of the level. And I would say this greatly matters. Even if blind parts of a track are no longer blind once you understand them, the practice of including them at all should be avoided as much as possible. Now, in the same section, at this final turn, there is an invisible road piece preventing an inner wall ride. Now, I'm not opposed to using invisible roads to prevent cuts. I've done it many a time before, but in an area as wide open as this, I think there definitely could have been a visible obstacle here preventing that path instead. But this only barely matters though, and is just a decoration choice. In fact, other places in the level are actually very visible, where you might think it could be blind. This loop, for example. Loops are the most susceptible to being blind, especially in third-person view. But this one expertly shows the line and follow-through as you're coming up to it, even giving you enough idle time after the loop for the camera to reinstate itself and for you to react to the next turn. But overall, this is a lovely smooth track that many will enjoy in lobbies, with the occasional chat message about that ending, I'm sure. Anyways, on to the next map. Rustus by me. And since I can't review my own track, take it away, Kern.
This map is great in a few ways, and little holds it back. It was made to be good for beginners, and it clearly achieves this. First, the gameplay is quite simple and repetitive, which is great for thinking about the line you take and how to improve it. The bank transitions and turns are very consistently prevalent, which adds to the benefits to beginners. At the same time, there's slight variation with each iteration of the bank transition turn, which keeps it interesting and helps new players better understand the physics of banks, which can be applied to thousands of other levels. Color usage is another aspect of the level that helps it appeal to beginners. The colors used on the track that you drive on are very consistent, and additionally the yellow, orange, and red colors used for decoration bordering the track contrast the desaturated grays of the track. One more small thing I appreciate about the map is how the decoration in the background and off of the track fills space and is visually interesting, but isn't distracting. One aspect that I dislike is the visibility of some of the bank transitions. One in particular immediately after checkpoint 5 is obscured by decoration, causing most people to not take it well. But for many of the transitions, the gray color of the track combined with the low perspective of the camera makes sight reading the line very difficult. Overall, the map is quite flowy and fun, especially after you learn it. It excels at being great for beginner Zeepkist players, as they certainly enjoy playing it.
Thanks for helping out, Kern. Bubblegum Twists by mdPL. This is a very easy to complete map, and that was indeed the intent. Anybody of any skill level should have no problem with this map, and as for the faster players, most of your time gain will come from steering the least amount possible. The surrounding decoration is simple but quite effective. The big trees fill the space nicely and does not make it feel empty at all. Now, first off, this color palette is very unique, and I don't think I've seen another level use it. Can I please eat whatever this track is made of? Additionally, I think this might be the first map I've seen use actual arrows in the road to help position you before a transition. It's unique and works wonderfully to teach newer players the usual setups to use in other maps. The boosters, or fans actually, also use some arrows just for that extra bit of being different, and they work fine, although I think they should have been a separate color from the other non-booster arrows. Onto the cons, beginning with this intangible green line. It's not very clear it's intangible at all on your first run, and probably does more harm than good in showing players what to do in this section, as some people might even try to avoid it as an obstacle, but really it only barely matters. Now, this can be an issue with a lot of maps aimed at newer players, but the cumulative AFK time in this track adds up to a substantial amount. There are a few long stints where you don't need any inputs at all, like this long loop here. Most of the time, big loops will always be AFK like this. Keeping the player engaged is a big part of the fun, so sections like this where they can easily take a quick sip of tea should be minimized as much as possible. In this case, it doesn't matter as much, but for reference, this is a thing that matters greatly when building maps. You should always be on the lookout for making a map as engaging as possible, as points of no input don't add anything to the track's fun factor. But lastly, and this is mostly a joke, this finish ring is absolutely cursed. And while I don't think there can be any shenanigans here, it does get my brain thinking about some sort of ending cheese. Overall, it's a simple and enjoyable map, but despite its simplicity, I would gladly play this track more. There's only a few points to touch up on, and they don't take away from the track too much. But alright, let's continue. Tip of the Underworld by Lexer. This is a nice, simple multipath map where most of your time saves will come from speed conservation. Apart from that one thing, but we'll get to that. The decoration is fairly basic, but it doesn't distract from the main focus of the track itself. Again, it is a common misconception that you need amazing decoration to make a good map, which is just entirely untrue. I would gladly race this map anytime it comes up in a lobby. Alright, the good things. Driving the intended line, it has a great flow to it. Although it may take you a few runs to get the hang of it, it feels great, saving even 1 or 2 speed over the whole track. The color palette is well made, and conveys the theming of this being the Underworld very clearly. It's also nice to see the glass and mesh paints being used effectively. Too often, creators will blind the player with too much information or overlapping elements, but Lexer definitely keeps moderation in mind with this level. And the insurance boosters are a nice touch, allowing the slower players to still complete the track like normal, but not eliminating the possibility of speed conservation for the faster players. Now, this map has a cut. This is neither good or bad, as some people will enjoy finding cuts, but for others it could ruin a map for them. This one is particularly easy though, and even slow players should be able to do it without much problem. So in this case, I wouldn't say this ruins the map, but it does mean that the first multipath selection becomes essentially obsolete. And is there anything bad about the track? Sort of. Multipath tracks generally suffer from this one thing, the fastest line quickly becoming the only line to complete the track. Especially when playing in lobbies with other players who may know that line already, you might not even get to experience the other paths at all. It's hard to describe this as good or bad either, but just know that when you make a multipath track, if one path saves you a significant amount of time over another, it will become that track's line to complete, so you better make it fun. But overall, this is definitely a fun track for any skill level. Whether that challenge being finding the fastest path on your own, or edging out those extra bits of speed to save a little time, this is an enjoyable map for sure. Alright, let's move on. And for the last review of this video, we have a bonus map, Sunbaked Desert by QuickRacer10. My immediate thoughts on this map is that it is quite difficult, but that is most likely because I'm trying the alternate paths too early on. But aside from that, the world this map resides in is gorgeous. I love the sense of feeling like I'm driving in a proper environment, as that is something that can be difficult to achieve when making a map. Now, something that also immediately jumps out to me is the optimization. The level has a high object count, so I had to check for myself. I thought I was being cheeky, trying to replicate the pattern using layered squares, but it ended up being 2 pieces more than the pixel wallride blocks that QuickRacer used here. It was the obvious choice for a design like this, but I figured there might be a more optimal way around it. I guess not. A quote I definitely came up with myself: "You'll not see bad optimization in a map that has good optimization present elsewhere." And looking at everything else, the terrain and this water here, they know what they're doing, and it is about as optimized as a map of this detail can possibly be. I know there's been a lot of talk about colors in this video, but colors are so important to the design of a track, and which ones you choose matter a lot to the overall feeling. And with the limited palette of Zeepkist's paints, it's great to see fresh new palettes when they come up. Inspired by the Super Mario Wonder world of the same name, this level stands out with its looks, replicating and expanding on the style from the 2D platformer. It's a really well-made recreation, and you can check for yourself. Anyways, this is yet another map with alternate paths. As said before, this is neither good or bad, it just depends on how you enjoy playing a map. I had quite the fun time experimenting by myself to figure out the fastest line, but because of its high precision and just how multipath maps work, this map becomes very hard very quickly. Almost all the paths are well signed and visible to everyone, except for this jump near the beginning. Trying to line up the landing without seeing it is obviously difficult, and the fact that the ramp itself is slippery snow does not help. Because there is another line guiding you on a jump further along in the map, I think having one here would have definitely been welcome. I guess this matters somewhat, as it is technically just a skill issue, but also the landing is just blind, and it sticks out as the hardest part of the whole map for sure. But otherwise, I think these alternate paths are fine, and with the skill level associated with each one, I think it evens out the time payoff you get from taking them, even if most of my runs will end at this jump. One thing I nearly missed is about the risky finish. Thank you, Lexer. Personally, I have never minded the checkpoint force fields, and have left them on the default settings since they were added to the game. But for some, they have those settings turned down, and because of that, this risky becomes nearly invisible, which is obviously not good, and therefore this matters greatly. Risky finishes should be as visible as possible, and while I doubt Quick Racer intended on hiding this one entirely, it is still a note to make about the force field block checkpoints. I recommend some other object or hint towards the risky finish being inside this red cube. Maybe one of the signs seen previously in the track. For my last note, these walls surrounding the roads could be considered a little too high. They don't let you see what is around the next corner, and therefore the level requires a bit of learning before you can cut them cleanly for those sweet time saves. It only barely matters, but I would have had these walls a little lower. But that's all I really have to say about the map. I think it's wonderfully made and does the multipath thing about as good as you can while retaining the fun. I quite enjoy it, and hope to see more maps like this from Quick Racer in the future. I've been Linzi, and thank you for watching episode 1 of ZMR. We hope you enjoyed, and if you want to submit a map for us to review, all you need to do is join the Discord linked in the description of this video. Once you're in, you can navigate to the ZMR Submissions channel and post a workshop link to your map in one of the threads for an upcoming video. And if that's too confusing, feel free to ask a ZMR contributor like myself what you need to do. But I've been talking for way too long now. We're excited to see what maps you guys have for us, so we'll see you in the next episode.